The document reached Buckingham Palace before breakfast, but its emotional force had been building for months. Carole Middleton had done what almost no royal relative would dare attempt. She had formally challenged the institutions surrounding her own daughter. Her legal action accused the palace of subjecting Catherine to relentless pressure, restricting her personal choices, and placing the preservation of the crown above the well-being of the woman expected to help carry its future. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At 8:15 that morning, a palace legal advisor entered King Charles's office, carrying a sealed claim marked urgent. He broke the seal, read the first page twice, and placed it flat on his desk without speaking. Buckingham Palace, the monarch's central working headquarters, had faced scandals, but this challenge came from family. The filing stated plainly that Carole had initiated legal action over Catherine's treatment, accusing senior officials of emotional neglect, excessive control, broken assurances, and decisions that ignored the Princess of Wales's health and dignity. The title identifies the heir's wife, but behind it stood a daughter whose strength had been used against her. Carole watched her solicitor send the papers from the Middleton home. A solicitor is a lawyer who prepares claims before court action. Her hand remained beside the telephone, yet she did not call Catherine. She feared her daughter might feel both protected and betrayed. She had not launched a campaign against the monarchy. Through a documented legal statement, her lawyers made clear that she wanted accountability for how the princess had been managed during public duty and private weakness. William received the news and understood the danger. His wife now stood between the woman who raised her and the institution she had married into. The prince faced an impossible divide: loyalty to Catherine as her husband, and duty to the crown as its future king. One section of the claim referred to confidential letters between the Middleton family and palace officials. Those letters, preserved as written correspondence, appeared to show that warnings about exhaustion had been delivered, recorded, and dismissed. Charles turned to the final page and discovered that money was not Carole's main demand. She wanted a review of palace conduct, disclosure of internal decisions, and enforceable protections over Catherine's future duties. The king finally lifted his eyes and asked, "Does Catherine know exactly what her mother has filed?" No one answered. Before the palace could build a defense, the family had to confront a more painful question. Who was Carole truly fighting, and which side would Catherine believe had failed her? Behind the legal language stood three people bound together by love and divided by duty. Carole saw a daughter whose strength had been mistaken for endless endurance. William saw a wife carrying expectations that no private citizen could fully understand. Catherine stood between them, aware that every attempt to protect her might become another force pulling at her life. The case was public, but its deepest wounds belonged to one family behind closed doors. Carole watched Catherine's royal life with pride shadowed by fear. She understood that public service demanded sacrifice, yet she never believed marriage into the crown erased her daughter's right to rest, privacy, or choice. The crown, meaning the monarchy as an institution, had given her daughter purpose and honor. It had also surrounded her with expectations that rarely loosened behind closed doors. Catherine sat alone with a copy of the filing across her knees. She reached the sentence describing her as a person before a royal asset, stopped, and folded the pages shut. The words comforted her because someone had named what she felt. They also exposed pain she had kept private, turning her silence into evidence and her endurance into a public argument. Carole answered the telephone on the second ring. Catherine asked why she had acted without her approval, and her mother heard hurt beneath the controlled voice. She replied that she had waited for months, hoping her daughter would speak first. Then she admitted the truth. She believed permission would never come from someone trained to endure quietly, smile carefully, and protect everyone except herself. William entered after the call and found his wife standing motionless. The prince, the heir expected to become the next monarch, did not defend the palace. He asked whether any part of the claim reflected what she had been unable to tell him. Catherine hesitated, then admitted that promises made during her weakest period had not been honored. She refused to name who had broken them. That refusal changed everything. William realized the dispute was no longer only between his mother-in-law and royal administrators. His wife carried grievances of her own, and she had hidden their full weight even from him. The future king felt loyalty split inside him: protect the institution he would inherit, or confront the machinery that had made Catherine feel unheard. William finally asked whether she wanted the case withdrawn. Catherine looked at him, but she did not say yes. Her silence became the most dangerous answer in the room, because it led directly back to the moment when private concern became irreversible anger. The incident Carole would later describe in a documented legal account as the final betrayal. Every family rupture has a moment that later becomes impossible to forget. For Carole, it was not a headline, a ceremony, or an argument witnessed by the public. It was a private evening at Windsor, when Catherine asked for one simple concession, and was denied. The refusal lasted less than 10 minutes. Its consequences would last far longer. From that night onward, Carole no longer believed the palace merely misunderstood her daughter's condition. She believed it had knowingly ignored it. Tension had been building around Catherine's return to royal duties. Palace planners wanted certainty, visible engagements, and a schedule that reassured the country after months of concern. Carole wanted something simpler, decisions based on her daughter's physical and emotional readiness. She had already sent 2 written requests asking officials to avoid rigid deadlines. Both received polite replies, yet neither created the firm limits she believed had been promised. Catherine entered a private scheduling meeting at Windsor carrying one request. She wanted a major ceremonial appearance postponed because the preparation, scrutiny, and public speculation felt impossible to manage. A ceremonial appearance is a formal royal event where attendance carries symbolic national importance. The senior court official listened, then slid the proposed schedule back across the table. He warned that cancellation would create a damaging vacuum. She removed her hand from the paper and answered quietly, "Then the vacuum matters more than I do." Carole waited in the adjoining room and knew something had changed before Catherine spoke. Her daughter emerged pale, insisted she was fine, and reached for her handbag. The clasp would not close because her fingers were trembling. Her mother stepped forward, but the princess pulled the bag against herself, as though even that small weakness needed to be hidden. Carole telephoned William that evening and confronted him directly. She told the prince that protecting Catherine in private meant nothing if the system surrounding them could overrule her in public. He promised to investigate, but the appearance remained under consideration. That delay convinced her that no individual, not even the heir, could guarantee her daughter's safety against palace machinery. Days later, Carole received a copied internal scheduling note from a documented legal disclosure. It described Catherine's reluctance as a communications obstacle. Those 2 words became the emotional and legal foundation of everything that followed. She read the phrase again that morning, feeling every unanswered warning return with it. This was no longer concern. It was proof of deliberate disregard. When palace lawyers learned the note might be produced in court, they summoned her to a private meeting. The invitation sounded conciliatory, but once Carole prepared to enter that room, neither side intended to surrender. The room was designed to make visitors feel the weight of royal authority. Carole Middleton entered it carrying something stronger, the memory of her daughter's trembling hands. Across the table sat the officials empowered to protect the crown from scandal. Beside them was King Charles, determined to prevent a family dispute from becoming a constitutional spectacle. Yet within minutes, the careful language collapsed. This was no longer about legal procedure. It was a mother demanding to know who had decided Catherine could endure anything. Carole placed the internal scheduling note on the table and looked directly at the official responsible for royal duties. No press officers were present, and no public statement could soften what followed. 2 senior legal advisors sat beside Charles, while the royal scheduler, the person who coordinates official appearances and commitments, kept his hands folded. She pointed to the phrase, "communications obstacle," and ordered him to read it aloud. The official hesitated. Carole pushed the paper closer and repeated the demand. Charles finally said the phrase was administrative shorthand, not a judgment on Catherine's worth. The king meant that officials had used brief internal language to describe a practical problem. Her answer cut through the explanation. "Institutions," she said, "often hide cruelty inside harmless words, because harmless words leave no visible bruise." Charles warned that litigation could expose Catherine to even greater scrutiny. He reminded Carole that court proceedings might pull private medical concerns, family conversations, and internal disagreements into public view. She did not retreat. Her voice hardened as she told the monarch that using her daughter's fear of publicity to prevent accountability was exactly the behavior the legal action had been created to challenge. The royal scheduler insisted that no duty had been imposed without consultation. Carole asked whether consultation meant anything when saying no produced pressure, warnings, and predictions of national disappointment. Then she revealed, through a documented account prepared by her legal team, that they possessed a second internal communication. It warned that giving Catherine full control over her schedule could create a precedent for other working royals, meaning family members who perform official duties for the crown. Charles turned towards his advisors and asked whether he had been shown that document. Their silence lasted only seconds, but it told him everything. The system operating in his name had withheld the truth from him. Carole rose and delivered her final condition. She would suspend the action only if Catherine personally requested it, alone and without palace representatives present. The king agreed, but William would have to decide whether that meeting could happen safely. Carole had forced the monarch to listen. Now the future king had to choose between the palace he would inherit and the marriage he could lose. William had spent his life preparing to inherit the monarchy, but no training had prepared him to choose between its authority and his wife's sense of safety. The palace expected him to calm Carole, contain the lawsuit, and protect the crown. Catherine needed something more difficult, proof that he would confront the system before asking her to forgive it. Alone with the case file, the future king realized neutrality was no longer responsible. It was simply another form of abandonment. William held unique power. He could not order a court to stop the case, yet his support could decide whether the palace resisted, settled, apologized, or changed. Senior advisors urged him to distance himself from Carole's accusations. They warned that silence might look like agreement and weaken royal authority, while the institution appeared divided. The crown, meaning the monarchy as a governing institution, depended on unity. His marriage depended on honesty. William read the internal note alone in his study and circled the words, "Communications obstacle." The prince set his pen down so sharply that ink marked the edge of the page. Anger rose first. Officials had reduced Catherine's distress to a management problem. Guilt followed, because every decision had been made inside the institution he was preparing to lead, under rules he would one day inherit. Catherine entered quietly and saw the marked page. She told him she did not want this conflict to destroy his relationship with Charles. William answered that protecting his father from embarrassment could not matter more than protecting his wife from being treated like a function. The future king did not raise his voice. That restraint made the promise heavier. He would not attack the monarch, but he would challenge anyone who had hidden the truth from him. William ordered a confidential review of every message concerning Catherine's duties. A confidential review is a private investigation kept outside normal public reporting. He excluded several palace figures who would usually control such an inquiry, making one fact clear: he no longer trusted the existing chain of command. Catherine watched him sign the instruction and understood that he had chosen action over balance. The first findings arrived through a documented internal report. They showed a pattern. Concerns raised by Catherine's household had repeatedly been softened before reaching Charles. The king heard about scheduling difficulties, but not always about their emotional severity. William then received the name of the official who had authorized the filtering. The person had direct access to the monarch and enough influence to turn private warnings into harmless summaries. As the prince prepared to confront that hidden authority, Carole's lawsuit began producing consequences no private settlement could contain. The first consequence was not a courtroom hearing, it was fear inside the palace. Staff members began reviewing old messages, private assurances, and scheduling decisions, wondering which words might now appear in a legal file. Yet the deepest fracture was personal. Charles discovered that information had been filtered before reaching him. Catherine learned that her private distress had circulated as administrative discussion, and Carole understood that her case had opened a door the institution could no longer quietly close. The palace suspended the senior official linked to the communications review. Staff were told the action was temporary, but nobody believed it was minor. It was the first visible concession forced by Carole's legal pressure. Planning meetings involving Catherine stopped while new consent procedures were drafted. Those procedures required written confirmation that she had approved the timing and conditions of every future engagement. The change mattered, because written consent could no longer be reinterpreted by officials. Charles summoned the suspended official and placed the disputed messages between them. The king listened until the explanation ran out, then removed his glasses. "You protected me from the truth and called it service," he said. Delegation had hidden the full story from him, but it had not removed responsibility. Every decision made in his household still carried his authority. Betrayal burned beneath restraint. Joined by guilt that distance had helped the system harden, Catherine felt no relief. She told William that punishing one person would change nothing if the culture still rewarded those who made royal lives appear effortless. The prince understood why that mattered. A suspension could calm headlines, but only reform could prevent the same pressure from returning under a different name. Carole's lawyers then confirmed through a documented legal notice that they were prepared to seek testimony from current and former staff. Testimony means evidence given formally in a legal case. The threat could expose years of private conflict involving image, duty, illness, and family access. A former aide also offered a recorded statement showing that Catherine had repeatedly requested fewer intermediaries between herself and senior decision-makers. Those requests had been delayed because direct access was considered disruptive to palace protocol, the established rules governing royal work. Camilla urged Charles to settle before the dispute consumed the monarchy. The queen consort feared that one lawsuit could drag every unresolved family grievance into public judgment. He did not dismiss her warning. Catherine, meanwhile, made the decision nobody expected. She agreed to meet Carole without lawyers, courtiers, or protection officers inside the room. With the palace stripped away and no institution left to speak for them, mother and daughter would finally confront what protection had cost them both. There were no advisors in the room, no legal documents on the table, and no royal titles in the way. There was only Catherine and the mother who had decided she could no longer watch quietly. Carole expected anger. Catherine carried plenty of it. But beneath the anger was exhaustion, and beneath the exhaustion was a truth neither woman could avoid. One had acted because she feared losing her daughter, while the other feared losing control of her own life. Catherine had chosen the Middleton family home because she wanted no husband, heir, lawyer, or official shaping the conversation. William remained elsewhere and honored that request, even though the prince knew the outcome could decide the future of the case. The meeting mattered because, for the first time, neither the palace nor the legal action could speak louder than the two women at its center. Carole began with an apology. Catherine interrupted before her mother could finish. She asked whether she was sorry for filing the case or sorry for not telling her first. Her mother paused, then admitted that they were not the same apology. She regretted the secrecy, but she could not regret refusing to watch her daughter suffer in silence. Catherine told Carole that the lawsuit had turned private pain into a national conflict. She felt exposed, discussed, and managed all over again. Everyone had spoken about protecting her, yet she remained the person expected to carry the consequences. Her mother answered that watching her protect everyone else had become unbearable. The princess's composure had convinced officials that more could always be demanded, while convincing her family that intervention might feel like betrayal. Carole then offered to withdraw the litigation immediately. Litigation means a formal dispute handled through the courts. Catherine refused to answer until she knew whether the palace reforms were permanent, rather than temporary promises designed to silence the case. She admitted the claim had forced officials to acknowledge concerns she had never been able to raise effectively. The method still hurt her. The change could not be denied. Catherine made the decision in a recorded private conversation, later preserved by both sides. She would personally negotiate the settlement terms. Neither her mother, William, Charles, nor palace lawyers would define protection on her behalf. Carole accepted that boundary. Catherine reached for her mother's hand before the meeting ended. The gesture was not complete forgiveness, but it ended the fear that the case had destroyed them. She returned to Windsor carrying written conditions of her own. Those terms would force Charles and William to decide whether royal tradition could yield to personal dignity. Before the palace could answer, the world learned that the princess had finally taken control of the case bearing her name. By sunrise, the dispute had escaped every private chamber. The country was no longer debating only a lawsuit. It was debating whether royal duty had become a language used to silence personal suffering. Some saw Carole as a mother who had crossed an unforgivable boundary. Others saw her as the only person willing to challenge an institution built to outlast individual pain. Then Catherine appeared at Windsor with a document of her own, and the entire argument changed direction. Media coverage split. Traditional royal commentators condemned Carole's action as an intrusion into palace governance, while legal and health advocates described it as a fight over consent, workplace responsibility, and personal freedom. Palace governance means the internal system used to manage royal duties and decisions. The divide mattered because the case was no longer only about one family. It had become a test of how far duty could reach into a person's life. Charles refused to attack Carole publicly. The king knew that any harsh response would make the monarchy appear to be intimidating a worried mother. Then a London newspaper published an empty palace balcony beneath the headline, "Who Protects the Princess?" The front page became the defining symbol of the crisis, turning absence into accusation. Outside Kensington Palace, a small crowd gathered with handwritten signs reading, "Catherine is human," and "Duty must have limits." Kensington Palace is a royal residence and working base connected to William and his family. One woman placed flowers beside the gates and told a broadcaster during a recorded interview that strength should never be mistaken for consent. Her words traveled quickly. Carole watched the coverage from home and felt the argument beyond her control. She had never wanted Catherine turned into a public emblem of suffering. Yet she also knew that withdrawing too soon could erase the reforms already within reach. William faced the same pressure inside a palace briefing. The prince rejected a prepared statement calling the conflict a misunderstanding, crossed out the sentence, and replaced it with an admission that his wife's concerns had not always been handled properly. Catherine's written conditions then reached Charles. She demanded independent welfare oversight, direct control over her schedule, protected access to her family, and a formal admission that palace procedures had failed to respect her limits. The monarch accepted every condition in substance. Only the wording of the public apology remained disputed, because one sentence would decide whether the settlement sounded compassionate or culpable. Catherine entered the final meeting, read the proposed statement, and changed that sentence herself. The legal battle had begun with Carole's signature. It would end with the princess choosing exactly what the crown must finally admit. The final statement did not speak of misunderstanding. Catherine refused to let the truth disappear behind a polite phrase. It acknowledged that palace procedures had failed to respond adequately when she expressed personal and health-related limits. With those words, the monarchy accepted something it had resisted throughout the crisis. Devotion to duty did not cancel the right to be heard. Carole's case had threatened to divide a family, but Catherine's intervention transformed it into a reckoning and a chance to rebuild what silence had damaged. Charles approved Catherine's revised statement without removing a single admission. The palace formally accepted that its handling of her concerns had failed and committed to permanent safeguards for every working royal, meaning a family member who performs official duties for the crown. That mattered because the settlement did more than calm one crisis. It changed how the institution would treat consent, health, and personal limits in the future. Carole agreed to withdraw the legal action once the settlement became binding. She accepted no personal financial award, proving that protection, accountability, and structural change had always mattered more than compensation. The king signed the agreement and passed the pen to Catherine. She added her name, closed the folder, and said, "This must protect the next person before they are forced to ask." Charles then apologized directly. He spoke not as monarch to princess, but as father-in-law to daughter-in-law. The king admitted that good intentions could not excuse a system that filtered pain until it became invisible. Catherine accepted the apology, but she made clear that forgiveness would depend on whether the reforms survived after public attention faded. William later met Carole privately. The prince told her he had hated the danger created by the lawsuit, yet he could no longer deny why she believed it necessary. She answered that she had never doubted his love for Catherine. She had doubted only whether the institutions surrounding them would respect it. Catherine did not celebrate what had happened. She forgave the fear that drove her mother, then told Carole that protection could never again mean acting around her. It had to mean standing beside her and listening first. The palace adopted independent welfare advice, direct control over health-related schedules, and immediate access to the monarch or heir when concerns were minimized. The case ended without destroying the crown or dividing the family. Instead, the monarchy chose the woman over the machinery built around her. Catherine's duty belonged to the crown, but her voice, her health, and her life remained her own. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.